So today's review is from Mancera Instant Crush. So this is a pretty well-known, famous fragrance, and it's unisex and it came out in 2019. So the thing about it is that it's mainly a warm and spicy fragrance, but it does have some other unique notes to it. So I'm gonna put a spray on here and see how it smells. Immediately, you get these certain spices, this certain citrusy opening. There's not too many notes. The top notes mainly consist of saffron, ginger, Sicilian mandarin, and Sicilian bergamot. So the thing about this, I would say the citrus opening is very unique because, you know, a lot of fragrances have citrus openings, but they're usually pretty fresh, pretty sharp, you know, very clean. This is a little bit different because it's mixed with primarily, you know, more spicy notes like the saffron and the ginger. So the thing about the citrus opening is that it's a little bit more toned down and more specifically a bit warmer, not cold and fresh as you would expect from, you know, typical citrusy openings. The saffron note is very present along with the ginger. If you smell ginger, you know it's a very, very strong, sharp note, and then saffron's a little bit on the warmer, spicier side. It smells a little bit, probably because of the saffron, because it shares the same note as Baccarat Rouge 540. Now, Baccarat Rouge is way sweeter than this. This is pretty sweet though, which is interesting because it is unisex, but it's definitely on the sweeter side. The middle notes then have amberwood, rose, jasmine, and some patchouli. So again, you got some of the heavier notes and then some of the sweeter notes, the florals versus the amberwood and things like that. So the amberwood, you could definitely get that as well because it's just such a resinous, woodsy, heavy, slightly musky sort of note. The patchouli is kind of the same. It's more of a green, heavy sort of note. Then of course you get the jasmine and the rose, which are more floral, more sweeter on the sweeter side, and on the lighter side as well, to kind of get a little bit of this balance, especially since the saffron and ginger in the top notes are so just intense on their own. Then going down to the base notes, and there's only 4 base notes, which is Madagascar vanilla, white musk, sandalwood, and oak moss. So those are all relatively heavy notes. You often find a lot of those notes in a lot of different fragrances, especially sandalwood and vanilla and things like that. So here's kind of my perception of this, because when you first smell it, it's kind of this very warm, slightly citrusy sort of fragrance. Then it becomes a little bit more sweet, and then it becomes a little bit more musky and woodsy. Primarily, it's hard to say because this thing kind of goes back and forth between sweet and like warm, musky, spicy, which is interesting because this is definitely one of those fragrances that evolve on the skin over time. You know, it smells like one thing when you first put it on and then it smells completely different within a few hours, which I like. I like fragrances that do that because it just makes them more interesting or has more character. Now, the vanilla note, I would say, is on the moderate side. It's not a super vanilla forward fragrance, especially not like a sugary sweet vanilla or anything. It's more on the warmer side. The sandalwood is definitely there. It adds a certain kind of woodsy texture, a nice foundation to the overall fragrance. The oak moss is a little bit faint. You can kind of get it, the kind of dry plant material smell. And then the white musk, which is pretty light. This definitely is not a musk forward animalistic scent. It's just more of a kind of toned down musk, a clean musk almost, but there is a certain sweetness that I don't know where it's coming from. I imagine, because it's a warm, spicy, warm sweetness, so I imagine it comes from some sort of blend between the florals and maybe the saffron and ginger, and something like that, maybe a little bit of the vanilla, but the vanilla itself isn't all that sweet. So the other thing I like about this is that it is very strong, stronger than I was expecting. It is a really good projector. Again, just a little bit similar to Baccarat Rouge, in which it's a huge projector and extremely strong and very long lasting. This is a little more toned down compared to that. this is definitely, the projection is above average. You know, if you put this on, definitely if you're in a crowd of people, they will notice that you are wearing this. Now, I wouldn't say it projects all the way across the room, maybe not that strong, but still strong enough to be, you know, effective. Then, in terms of longevity, this is, you know, this sticks around. The sweet and spicy notes that it has, definitely, they stick around for a long time. I would say it's probably prominent enough to last about 7 hours, which is, you know, pretty good for longevity. And you won't have to worry about reapplying it. You could just put it on in the morning or whatever time, and it'll last pretty much as long as you need it, which is, of course, effective and convenient. Then, I would say, in terms of the unisex capability, it is a little bit more on the feminine side just because of the amount of sweetness that it has. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's too much on the feminine side, just a little bit on the feminine side, because that the sweetness there is definitely, you know, what you would expect from a more feminine fragrance, but then it's immediately pulled back by the more musky, spicy notes that it has. So it still maintains a sort of unisex balance, with just a little bit of, you know, more on the feminine side. But I do like it because it has all these different notes that come together, and some of them you wouldn't expect to work all that well together, but they do work. Like, you know, saffron I quite like as a note in general. It's just a nice kind of smooth, warm note, and a little bit exotic because you don't really come across saffron that often in fragrances. Then the same thing with the ginger. You don't come across ginger that often. Mixing with the amberwood, which is, you know, very resinous, very warm. And then some more typical notes like sandalwood and vanilla and musk and things like that. So, you know, these different layers, you put them together, it creates a very, very unique type of fragrance, which is, it proves to be very effective. This is a pretty popular fragrance for both men and women. Instant Crush, people quite like it. I haven't seen too many people who really dislike it. And it is from a high quality fragrance brand, Mancera. You can't really go wrong with them in terms of quality, you know, because they do a pretty good job of crafting all their fragrances. But this one definitely, if you don't care for fragrances that have a sweet side, this might not be for you. But if you do, of course, enjoy a little bit of sweetness, Instant Crush is pretty good in terms of that. And as I mentioned before, it does kind of become a little bit warmer, a little bit more on the earthy, musky side as it settles down on the skin. It's definitely going to be a little bit sweeter when you first put it on, and it becomes more mild over the hours. But that's pretty much my review here of Mancera Instant Crush. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, of course, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and I make videos throughout the week, so stick around for those.